This video is going to be about blade chatter, what causes it, how to prevent it, and how to fix it once it's already happened.
Want to hear the most annoying sound in the world?
If you've ever tried to make a bow or use a draw knife, there's a pretty good chance you've run into blade chatter. Blade chatter usually happens when you set the blade perpendicular to the wood and try to use it like a scraper. You're peeling a fine layer of wood off, and then all of a sudden it starts vibrating and you get these ugly marks in your wood. Usually at this point, the thing that people do next is the exact thing that you should not be doing. They take their draw knife for another stroke and try to take those grooves out of the wood. This almost always results in making these chattering marks worse, because as that blade is traveling down the wood, it falls into those grooves and then bounces over them, and it starts cutting in. Every time it comes back down, it's going to cut in. And it's going to bounce back up, cut in, bounce up, cut in. Something else people try to do is turn their knives back down, and they think they can just scrape those off like that. The problem is, usually if you're scraping your bow, that means you're down to the point where you don't have a lot of wood to get rid of. So if you turn your knife down like this, you could very quickly, with one swipe, cut too deep and ruin your bow limb. Now, I've found a few things that seem to cause blade chattering when I'm building a bow. One is that your bow wood is not going to be all created equal. There's going to be parts that are harder than others, so you might have a knot in here that's going to be harder than the wood next to it, and that may just be even a heat treated spot. So if you had to heat treat your limb, that wood is going to be harder than the wood next to it. So what I've found is that when I'm drawing that knife across this wood, peeling that wood off, when I hit the harder section, that blade will tend to rise up because it doesn't want to cut into it as deeply. And so what happens is that blade will come up, and then it'll fall back down and hit the wood, and it will gouge it a little bit, and then it will bounce back up, and you start this oscillation process where your blade just starts skipping over the top of the wood. One thing that exacerbates this issue is that your wood is flexible, of course, and so every time the blade hits the wood, your wood's going to move too. And so if everything matches up perfectly, then you get this oscillation and the loud vibrating noises out of your blade and out of the bow wood. Now, you can't always control what's in your bow wood, but you can do some other things to prevent blade chatter from happening most of the time. One of the big things that you can do is to actually just have your tool properly sharpened. So you can imagine if the tip of this blade is not real sharp, if it's kind of rounded off, it's going to be more likely to skip over these harder sections of wood. It's not going to want to cut into them. If I'm going to use my draw knife in a scraping fashion, I like to actually sharpen this so that there is a burr coming off the back side of the knife. So when I sharpen it, I'm only sharpening downwards in this direction with my stone, so that you get a real small burr that curls up. And that sharp burr will aid in peeling the wood up as you pull your knife across the bow wood. There's another really important thing that you guys can do to prevent blade chatter, and that is to properly support your bow. You'll probably notice that the chatter actually begins to happen as you get further away from the vise. You can see the wood doesn't move that much by the vise, but as you get further away, there's a lot more wiggle and a lot more play in it. Even a razor blade can be made to chatter if not given the proper amount of support and pressure. My favorite way to support the bow while I'm working on it is to shove it into my midsection here. Not only is it going to hold it still, it's going to put a dampening effect on it. So as any vibrations start to happen, your body is going to absorb those. One more thing that can cause blade chatter, and this is somewhat related to your knife not being sharp enough. If your knife is making too much contact with the wood, the force is spread across the whole blade. This will mean that once again you're not putting enough force down, and your blade's going to be likely to skip. There is a workaround to this problem, and what you can do is turn your blade up like this and actually start, when you're tillering, start working on these corners. And so just take a little bit off like that. And then the next time you come in, you're going to work on this corner right here. And so what you gradually end up doing is you send a series of these peaks across this bow. And you can do the same from the other side. And by doing that, you're only taking off these little strips at a time until you work your way across the bow. Lastly, I'm going to show you guys how to fix the marks that you got from the chatter. And this is pretty easy. Instead of going straight at them like the way they were caused, turn your draw knife at an angle and draw across them. These card scrapers can also be handy for getting these marks out. And use it the same way. Turn it sideways and start scraping those things off. And it's okay to even come from the other direction. Just keep it at an angle. The next thing you know, it's going to be smooth as can be.